May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our rock and our Redeemer. To start with, happy Pride. It is a strange Pride week, of course, because there's no parades. There's not an opportunity to throng together in the streets and sing. When and if we take to the streets this year, it's vitally important, but it's not for the purpose of celebration. I never thought I'd miss the arguments about whether corporations have taken over Pride, or about whether straight people should show up. All those things that seemed so divisive and frustrating in previous years. But now, in a year without a march, I really wish that those arguments were all that we had to worry about. There's something quieter and more personal about Pride this year, and maybe that's a good thing. Being alone with my thoughts about this stuff really takes me back to my youth. Yeah, my youth, I know, haha. To a time when I didn't have the option of participating in Pride parades. To a time when marching with the church would have been completely unimaginable to me. I think that's an experience that many of us in the LGBTQ community share. That experience of loneliness is what I think about when I think about today's psalm. Lord, will you ever remember me? Why keep turning away from me? Because one of the ways we learn about God is through the church. And for so many years, even when churches weren't explicitly anti-gay, they somehow seemed to squeeze us out. Love the sinner, hate the sin isn't nearly as kind in practice as some people wanted it to be. Many of us here know that pain, the feeling that we're feasting on scraps, that we ought to be grateful for not being thrown out of the banquet altogether. It's that pain experienced in other denominations that brought many of us to the Episcopal Church to begin with. Our church can feel like a glorious safe haven where we are affirmed and upheld. I am so proud to tell my friends that in our church, you can marry the person you love regardless of their gender identity. I am so proud to shout from the rooftops that we hold this glorious Pride Mass every year, that we pull out the disco ball, and that we celebrate the full diversity of God's glorious creation. From the first year I came here to St. Mark's, I felt God's unconditional love surround me. Together, today and every day, we affirm that all people are children of God, who have a full and equal claim on the love, acceptance, and pastoral concern and care of the church. And we need to affirm that. We need to express our pride, because for so many years we had to hide it. We need you straight folks to come and celebrate with us as our allies, to affirm that you see us as nothing less than holy. My favorite thing about our Pride Mass and the Pride Parade itself is a paradox. When we sing and dance together in joy, when we feel ourselves so unconditionally accepted and pour out the gift of unconditional acceptance to others, we take pride in our identities, and at the same time, we give up the sin of pride. Now, it can be confusing to talk about pride as a sin. So in this context, right? So in this context, I'm going to use the Greek word for it, hubris. If humans are made in God's image, hubris is the perversion of those very faculties that make humans like God, dignity and holiness. Hubris is imagining oneself equal to God, overconfidence, the pride that goeth before a fall. And when you put it like that, it seems like an obvious sin, easy to point out. When a preacher declares that prayer alone will keep their congregants safe from the coronavirus, of course that's hubris. That's the sin of pride. When a politician puts his own re-election over the good of a nation, of course that's hubris. But hubris is a sneaky sin because it's not just about thinking that you're better than other people in a straightforward way. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, take a step back. Humans are status-seeking animals. And by that, I mean we like hierarchy. We go around in our lives looking at other people and wondering if we're okay in comparison to them. That's how the engine of consumerism works, right? I log on to social media and I see that all my friends have posted the most beautiful photographs of their lives. They're sailing a boat on the vineyard, or competing in an underground rap battle, or building a robot dog. And it all seems way more interesting than my own life, which consists mostly of refreshing social media. So when Instagram feeds me an advertisement for handmade shoes, I buy them, because then I can take a picture of my shoes and feel like I fit in with my fabulous friends. And that's the comparatively good version of status seeking. That's the version that can be solved, however temporarily, by buying a pair of shoes. But we all know that this status hunger, this security hunger within us, can't be permanently solved by buying anything. And for me, maybe for you too, when I was a young teenager, this security hunger was intimately tied to my sexuality. Everyone else seemed to have it figured out. So I tried to act like I had it figured out too. I tried to act like I knew exactly who I was. And I enforced this regime on other people. I wanted everyone to fit neatly into little boxes. It was okay to announce that you were gay, as long as you had a coming out story that fit the accepted narrative, as long as you threw out all your sexual hang-ups in the name of freedom, as long as you held the right political views. It was okay to announce that you were trans, as long as you were the right kind of trans, as long as you planned to undergo a surgical transition and planned to pass for the rest of your life. Because if you didn't adhere to these categories, if you didn't fulfill all of these little steps, if you didn't adhere to the rules, you are suspect. Because if we didn't have rules to adhere to, how would I know that I was okay? In fact, I did a pretty good job of reinventing all those old restrictions that I hated. All those rules I dreamed of escaping, just in a slightly different form. When I passed judgment on people for not conforming to my expectations, for being bisexual and quote unquote unable to decide, or for not fitting into binary gender, when I passed judgment on myself for all those things and refused to live my truest life out of fear that I might be found wanting, I was setting myself up as the great arbiter of right and wrong. I was setting myself up as a little tin pot dictator god. And the person I oppressed most was me. The rules that I made up, the rules that gave me a false sense of comfort, were the very rules that were stifling me. The very thing that was separating me from God, the real God, the God beyond all our petty fears. And that was hubris. And I think we've all felt that kind of hubris, even if it wasn't about our sexuality or our gender. Maybe it was about our class status or our race or our culture, all the little judgments that we make day to day. And then the hubris of believing that we are somehow specially broken, specially unlovable, because we don't live up to our own standards, because we can't perfectly conform to our own rules. It's a sad state of affairs. And to all of that, God says, no. Who are we to think that we are specially broken? Who are we to think that we are somehow unusually bad? Not by virtue of having hurt someone else, but by virtue of simply existing. We are not under the law, but under grace. Before God formed us in the womb, God knew us. We are fearfully and wonderfully made. We are loved, no matter who we are, and no matter what we do. More than that, we are loved for who we are, because of who we are. And it is not our responsibility to decide who is okay and who is not. We are all okay. When we come together each year and march in the Pride Parade, when we dance together at the end of Pride Mass, through that coming together, there's the opportunity to forget about all our individual fears and worries and judgments, to abandon all distinctions and to submerge ourselves in the ocean of love that always surrounds us. A crowd, whether it's the crowd at Pride or the crowd downtown at Occupy City Hall, makes it a lot easier to feel that ocean of love. So this year we're presented with a challenge. How can we feel that transformative love even when we're not together? Close your eyes and envision it. There are young trans girls sitting in their parents' houses, eagerly anticipating their first dose of hormones. Old gay men holding hands in the 5th floor walk-up where they've lived since 1975. There are butches spending quarantine getting swole and butches spending quarantine getting fat. There are non-binary teens making protest signs and people in middle age trying to explain what genderqueer means to their elderly parents. There are straight boys trying to explain to their friends they're not gay, and gay boys trying to explain to their friends they're not straight. There's a woman somewhere looking at herself in her wedding dress, and another looking at herself in her wedding suit. There are babies who don't yet know who they are or who they may become. There's thousands more, and they have skin of every shade, hair of every texture. They speak every language under the sun. In short, there's all the people who we see at Pride. They're still out there. We can't even imagine all the kinds of people there are. We aren't omnipotent, but we're part of that grand sweep of humanity too, all perfectly correct to be proud of who we are, all united in God's love. I trust in your love and rejoice, for you save me. I will sing to the Lord who treats me with kindness. Amen.